Echo
So,
team,
Echo what?
Echo team, do you have fuel?
Now I do. Yay. All right. So let's start off with Daily Trust. Now, DSS, Customs, EFCC, and others are racing against time. Now, people are selling petrol for about 500 naira per liter. In Abuja, in Ondo State, it's about 600 naira. And in areas like River State, it's just approaching 500 naira as well. Now, consumers are expressing a lot of outrage over the worsening scarcity of the commodity amidst the price hikes that have largely become unregulated.
Yes. You see, the thing is this, right? In this nation, we're becoming more like, not becoming more like, we have been ostriches for a long time now. It's just that we're becoming bigger ostriches. We're digging our heads into the ground and acting like we don't know where the root or the problem is coming from. And every day we keep looking like, for the lack of a better word, let me use my daughter's word, looking like dodo heads, acting like we're being smart. You see, in this article here, Buhari chairs 14-man committee as full scarcity worsens, meaning the federal government through the presidency has created a committee, okay, on top of all the existing structures. I mean, God forgive me if I have to go down all the existing structures that exist that should have been dealing with this issue. On top of all these structures, now Buhari create another committee, right? To do what? To address the fuel scarcity. Now, this is a 14-man committee brought up to enforce the petroleum product supply and compliance with official prices, since consumers, that all of us have been expressing outrage over the worsening scarcity amid the hikes, etc. Now, it's a short story. Now, who is in this committee? You have the Minister of Finance, Budget and Planning, Permanent Secretary to Petroleum Secretary, the Minister of Petroleum himself, that is the presidency, the Minister of State for Petroleum, that's Timire Silva, the National Economic Advisor, the DG that's the DSS, the Comptroller General of Customs, EFCC, NSCDC, and then other members of the CBN, NMPC. I mean, come on, how many times are we going to do this? It's getting very ridiculous. Why? Why am I screaming and shouting? First of all, and this is why we say during the elections that Nigerians should pay attention, leave the presidency. Honestly, you can leave the presidency. That will happen whether you like it or not. So focus on the governors of your state, one, and then your federal representatives, that's your senators and your House of Reps. Those are the people you should have your mind on, because those are the people who are meant to check this ridiculous executive recklessness that takes place all the time. Now, corporate governance is where you have the right structure with the checks and balances. Now, in this instance, there's an aberration of the president as the Minister of Petroleum. This is a no-no. Why this was allowed, I have no explanation, because you cannot check them if the president is the head of an institution. Who is going to tell him, oh God, what you said, what you asked me to do is wrong? That is why you have corporate governance, checks and balances. Let there be a substantive minister of petroleum who you can hold his neck or jugular or check whenever things go wrong. But this instance, the president sits on top of it. Who are we going to blame? So that is why you start hearing us acting like ducks, quacking, quack, 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 whenever the issue's happening. And you can't even hold the person who is responsible for this issue. What is the root of the problem? Nigeria produces oil, one of the largest, but we don't have refineries, okay? That's an old issue. Bring it forward. Two, we import fuel. Now, you don't import fuel for 2 naira. It comes at dollar exchange rate. And because our naira is not strong, what it means is that we have to take our daily earned dollars from exports to be able to pay for this subsidy. Now, you have another twin problem, which is crude oil theft, meaning you don't have as much dollar as you used to have before because it's being stolen. That's another story. Thirdly, the subsidy which is being claimed is not even coming in because that's a whole lot of corruption at the end of the day. The customs have told you, if you're going to let out how many, 2,000, 100, how many they say our consumption rate, about 100 million liters per month. Yes. Yes, that's about 2,000 trucks coming from Apapa. Nobody sees 2,000 trucks in Apapa. So who are we fooling at the end of the day? It's about time, Nigerians. Let me tell you, you will suffer this until you get it right. ensure that you put in the right people in the National Assembly so that they can put in the right legislature. Check the executives when they're being reckless. This is not a Buhari issue. Anybody who is in a place where there's freedom, no consequence for wrong actions, will do the same thing. I rest my case.
All right, let's move on to Vanguard. And this says petrol scarcity, bad roads, high operational costs fingered as shortage persists. Now, the national president of the NARTO, which is the Nigerian Association of Road Transport Owners, is blaming bad roads in the country and high cost of operations for the supply challenges that are being faced by operators. He's also stated high cost of capital has made it rather impossible for operators to raise funds to replace their trucks. And he also talks about the 25% interest loans that are being charged by the banks.
As an offshoot of where Divo stopped, one of the things that I realized with us Nigerians, myself inclusive, is that we're generally very good at describing the problems, and then we sit down and look for somebody else to solve our problems for us. That's why we are where we are today in respect of this. We know what the problems are. Ask the people we put in charge of this country from day one. How many of these problems have they attempted to honestly solve if they really meant well for this country? Now, we are describing this problem. So, which one option is cheaper to transport fuel from Lagos to Borno? 2,000 trucks per day, as Divo just described, or the 60 million liters pipe sent across the country through the pipelines? Can our roads sustain the weight and the rigor of 2,000 trucks rolling over it every day? Could this be one of the reasons these roads are bad, because of the demand or the use we put them to, and they are not seeing the kind of maintenance that they should get? Why do we think that that's the best way to go about it? Why are we talking about trucks to move fuel around Nigeria in 2023? In 1980, we were moving fuel across this country using pipelines. 40 years after, we have gone back to trucks. In 1990, we were using rail lines that existed then to move these things. In 2023, we are going back to trucks. We are creating jobs for some people. Yes, that's what it means. Yes, but should that be, if it was to say that we're using trucks to move from as last mile options to places where the pipelines don't get to? Yes, but don't tell me that would move 2,000 trucks out of Apapa on a daily basis. How is that going to happen? I'm not sure there is anything anywhere in the world how that can happen, right? Then the question also then comes into business is business. At the end of the day, the reason this man gave, there's one reasons was saying take away the subsidy. So does it mean then that every time the bank raises their rates, interest rates, then government must pay you to keep the price at 180? If you want to do the business, do the business. Government's business is to make things easy for other people to be able to do. We cannot sustain this thing, obviously. This is an example of the reasons why we must end this subsidy. Is it going to be easy? It's never going to be easy. Is it going to hit other people? It's going to. My summation of subsidy, as I've always expressed, is just that the people who are involved in this subsidy only get hungrier, and they look for ways to increase this subsidy money. Because it is free money, people get rich off it. And the moment you put a stop to it, I can bet you would know the exact number of liters of fuel or products, petroleum products we consume in this country on a daily basis. Somebody just plucks a figure, 60 million. Okay, so in this Lagos, for example, yesterday, a lot of organizations in this Lagos did not allow their staff to work from home because the president was visiting. So did we still consume 60 million liters in Nigeria yesterday? So these are the little things that gives you an idea that these numbers are fictitious and people are getting rich off us. And we need to put a stop to it. The man has dragged the Honorable Minister of Petroleum into the matter that they should fix the road. We know how much this government, whether it is enough or not, is a different discussion. We know how much they have invested in fixing roads in the last 8 years, in the last 10 years, right? The government have done. But then, even in fixing this road, we're putting 2,000 trucks on it. Before you finish fixing it, it gets bad. So it starts all over again. We have realized that some people were talking about putting tankers on to move. Just last week, some of us Nigerians went and destroyed the rail tracks. One train got derailed. So the problems are so myriad. Even the pipelines I'm even speaking about, people deliberately go there to sabotage it, to steal products off it. So the problem is neither here nor there. There is no safety guaranteed moving in with trucks. There's no so even us the people, there's a problem with us that we need to solve. Us the people. If the Nigerians that do these things, they're the ones that steal up the pipelines, they're the ones that destroy the rail lines. We are the ones who put unofficial roadblocks on the road and tax these truck drivers and so on and so. These guys would have a reason to say our cost of doing business is high. So we must pass the cost to somebody else. And that's what we are seeing that is happening to us. And we must solve these problems. How? Us, the people, must first look ourselves inwards to ourselves. Are we truthful to our country that we are complaining about? If we don't solve that problem, there's nothing the government will do that will solve this problem.
All right, I've got some messages coming through. This one is from JP. He says this nation is odd. A committee for scarcity when the president is minister, ludicrous. Sadly, landed price today isn't more than 330 naira. How are people selling at 600 naira? Sad. Victor, I'm just going to pull this up. Victor says it's pure evil by the government to allow citizens buy petrol at 400 naira and burn off same in traffic, particularly the Aja traffic. He says he spent 2 hours in traffic from Aja to VGC. Okay, let's take a quick break and we'll continue the conversation on the other side. This is Freshly Pressed on Smooth 98.1.
First Bank. You first bank.
It's the breakfast on your radio.
Why you not working now?
We dey wait for manager make he come pay us our money now.
Good
Because
morning.
no pay.
Hi, good morning.
Excuse me. Mr. Adams!
Why are you recording me?
Why you dey hide now? Where these people their
No,
money?
it's a social media guy.
He's our social media.
I know, right?
Oh, okay.
Who send their money to them?
Oh my goodness.
Maybe when I come closer. Maybe when I bring out on our phone. Oh yeah, dial *894*1# to open your first money wallet account. Oh yeah, make una give manager 3 boza.
Hey, give people like give first money one at the 5 boza.
Enjoy unlimited bulk enrollment and bulk disbursement with First Money Wallet. Download the First Money Wallet app or dial *894*1# on any mobile phone to activate now. All money now on First Money. You first. First Bank.
Bless them with the face, bless them with the pretty mind too. Bless them with the face, bless them with the pretty mind too. I may look like her, but we're not the same, mind you. All the things I'm saying, I'll spit in your mind, mine too. Call it mental gymnastics or better, call it mindful. You can find your mind when you let the music find you, right here on Smooth 98.1. Smooth. This is Miss Eva Johnson, and don't you touch that dial.
You're listening to Freshly Pressed on Smooth 98.1. Our analysts this morning, Devo and Lakunle. We've got some messages coming through, and I'm just going to take a few and we'll move on to the next paper. This one is from Cisco Delgado, and he says, Olakunle, what do you expect? How can you run a pipeline from Port Harcourt to Kaduna? Definitely, there must be vandalism. And Shegun says, we need capital punishment for crimes. Okay.
We're going there.
Do we really
We're
want to
going
go there?
We're going there.
When do you want this moving away from capital punishment?
Why would we go there?
Right.
Okay, let's move on to Punch. The House of Representatives has passed for second reading a bill that is seeking to criminalize abuse of Fiscal Responsibility Act 2007, especially where it concerns borrowing and public debt. Now, this bill proposes a 3-year jail term and 500 million naira as a fine for a public official who breaches the provisions of Section 41.
Well, just like the person said, capital punishment. A bill is going into reading. I think it's past the second reading to bring about some kind of consequence. You see, part of the reason why there's a lot of impunity, okay, crime in Nigeria, why it festers, is because there are no consequences. There just seem to be no consequences in every form of dysmenorrhea or crime that people commit, especially within the public sector. Now, in this instance, what's his name? Sejeris Ogun, please remember that name. He's the one sponsoring this bill. And what he mentioned was that, how did he put it? That there are some lacunas, some gaps in the management of public finance. Because all the time we talk about all these huge amounts of money that were spent, borrowed, for example, I mean, a direct example is Ways and Means, 23 trillion naira in excess of the current act, and nobody's telling us what they spent with it, and nobody's head rolls. There's no form of consequence for breaching the law. So in this instance, they are ensuring that they are putting it in the law. Now, like I mentioned before, this is where we should take really important the kind of reps and senators we put in the National Assembly, because if they don't work, the executives will, at all levels, from the federal government to the state governors and the local government chairman, they are going to abuse it. Now, what they've said is that they're proposing a 3-year jail term or and 500 million as fine, either in one place or both, for any public official who breaches public expenditure in excess of what was approved, that was what approved in the budget, or what was borrowed. Now, they've said that the Fiscal Responsibility Act will be guided by some certain tenets, apart from the fact that, yes, you can spend within what was approved, but if you must borrow, because when you borrow, immediately the government goes into debt, that the debts must be commensurate to national income. So, for example, you see an institution whereby the government has to borrow to pay for subsidy, whereas we have a budget of about 10 trillion, which 6 trillion of that will be going to subsidy. It's obviously not commensurate. We cannot put all our money into one basket simply because we're trying to meet up with what we many call consumption. Now, the truth is, and what they've said is that the non-compliance of this, wherever you breach it, that's when you will face that crime. Now, two, whose call is this? It's the call of the Auditor General, the call of the Accountant General. These are two checks, two personnel who are key to ensuring that when they do their reviews and their reports, these reports are made public so that if those who have breached it can be sanctioned. And you know the problem we go through anytime the senators and the public finance committees are doing their budget calls. You see how many times you start hearing all the drama of, well, this money that was spent, I don't know how it was spent. This time you better know how it was spent, or else you're going to face the consequences for it. I think this should even be escalated, made even more stringent, so that public officials begin to have some level of deterrence is a big word. You must begin to fear. You must begin to become afraid when you are breaching the law. Because if you just put it at 500, how much did they put here? 500 million. The way Nigerians read it is still like 7 billion. When they hold you to ransom, pay off the 500M and then walk away. At some point, fear will begin to come into our veins when we deal with public funds.
All right, let us know what your thoughts are. The WhatsApp number 0809 444 981, and you can also tweet at smooth981. JP says truck distribution is not the issue, it's short supply. Trucks load from different depots. Warri, Calabar, Port Harcourt, and Lagos. The issue is inadequate supply as DSDP payments are failing. Victor says can't refine petrol, worse still can't even transport same within the borders. Let's move on to the nation. Senators reps draw battle line with the CBN over Naira notes. Now there is some controversy over the 31st January phase out deadline for the old notes. Members from the House are asking that the CBN grant a 6-month extension to allow these newly redesigned notes to remain legal tender alongside the old notes as well.
I stand with the CBN on this matter. If the reason given at the beginning is the reason we are where we are. I stand with the CBN. I don't see a reason for the extension, right? Having said that, um, the CBN says they have enough of these new monies out there. They've given the banks the matching orders to load the ATMs and all that. As at Saturday, last Saturday, we still had the old notes. I was a victim of that. I still got the old notes, a multiples of tens of thousands that I drew. It was all old notes in one of the banks in my neighborhood, right? So then the thing to that then is then to say that okay, so where when you go to a parties, these new notes appear in mints, people exchanging it for profit with you for you to spray in the party. So where are those monies coming from? Are we saying those monies are coming from the CBN or from the commercial banks itself? So there needs to be some form of sanction by the CBN or the commercial banks to ensure that these monies are out there. The governor says even that they have super agents where people can exchange this. Some of our banks have announced that they have weekends for people to come and exchange. So where is when people go and exchange, why are the banks still putting old notes in their machines for people to draw again? So these are the things that we need to look at, not necessarily that we should extend. Nigerians are used to late reacting late to everything, thinking that it's not my business now until there is if we increase it to 6 months, I can tell you in 6 months time we'll come back to this same thing. Let's extend it further again. I can tell you for free. Look at the example with NIN registration, look at the example with voters registration, and so on and so forth. So if we keep extending, we'll still come back to saying we need to put our foot down to get this thing done. Is it easy? No. Is it going to be inconvenient? Yes, it will be. But we need to do these things for the reasons the CBN has said that it was being done. I mean, that's just where I stand on it.
All right. This message from Lizzie, and Lizzie says subsidy was removed from kerosene, diesel, and jet A 1 years ago. How has the removal benefited Nigerians? The president has failed to fight corruption in the petroleum sector for years. If it's taking 2 hours to move along the Lekki Ekpe road now, what will happen when the refinery and Lekki port start full operation? All right, and this one's from BDA, and BDA says Devo is right. The fear factor is needed. 500 million is less than 500 million naira is less than $1 million. From presidents, government officials, don't misappropriate paltry amounts like that. And he says, God bless Nigeria.
Amen.
Okay, let's move on to our next story, and this one comes from this day.
The Nation.
The Nation. Okay, so let's move on to the Nation. David, do you want to start?
Okay, that's legislature judicial autonomy bills ready for Buhari's assent. Yes, quickly, the National Assembly some time ago did pass about 35 bills. Okay, this was tied to constitutional reform, the so-called restructure Nigeria. This is it. Now, 44 of the bills, and remember, for a bill to become law, for it to become enacted, it has to get the assent or the buy-in of 2/3 of the states. That's about 24 states need to buy into it for it to be. Now, this was delayed because whilst a few states had hooked up to them, about 24 states were refusing based on the fact that they wanted 4 other bills to be addressed, which at the chief of them was introduction of state police. However, now they've looked at it, and three of the highlights. One is that the legislative and judicial autonomy was passed, and that's speaking to first line charge. Before this act of legislators or even judiciary holding on to the coattails of the executive simply because it's the they get paid via the executive emolument. But in this instance, they get first line charge. So straight from the national coffers, they will get their money. So they don't have to go begging or trying to plead or work something out with the executives just to get their funding. Now, the one that didn't pass, which is really where the issue is the local government autonomy. The Omar Agege, that's the Deputy Senate President, was chiding that this was really the priority for the Senate, and that they noticed that it didn't sail because state governors who have an influence on their state assemblies did not allow this to pass. Now, you see, when I've been screaming and shouting about voting the right people into your assemblies at the federal level as well as the state level. This wrong structure that is in place is allowing governors literally what's the word, leech on the total amount. So instead of their 30%, they take a hold of the 20% that goes to local government. So literally, state governors have as much power as the president. And unfortunately, it didn't fly. So we hope that when there's time, we'll break down all the other ones, especially the issue of state police, which is very important because this insecurity, I mean, there's no moving forward in terms of investment if we continue with this daily, weekly insecurity attacks everywhere in the country.
All right, Emeka from Amuro says these senators always make it seem like they are fighting for the people, the same who struck out local government autonomy and also BVAs that could have benefited the people. I stand with the CBN on this one. And Olu says, I stand with DeVoe, but sadly, the legislatures emerge at the whim of governors and the parties, so they are beholden to the executive, so there are no checks and balances. We are our own enemy. In the later part of that, okay, we'll skip that bit. And this one is from King Solo, and he says, "Won't politicians hide under immunity with regards to the bill on fiscal policy?" And
No, immunity is just for the president, the
president,
vice president, and then the
governors.
governors.
All right, and I've got a message here. This one is from Austin, and he says I have a different view about the new Naira notes. Well, we can talk about that view on Lagos Talks, and that is coming up from 9 a.m. right here on Smooth 98.1. But that's all the time that we have for Freshly Pressed. Thank you so much, Devo, and thank you, Olakule, for joining us.
Thank you.
And special thanks to you for listening. Do stay with us. There is a lot more to come on the Smooth Breakfast.